Hi, I'm Tom McGillick from Strategies, and this is Millennial Australia in 10 charts. In the next 5 minutes, we're going to look at the key insights from the 2023 Australian Millennial Report. It's a piece of quant research we've conducted annually since 2018. Each year, the sample is a little over 1,200 respondents, but the age range increases each year. So the 2018 data references responses from 18 to 35-year-olds, but the 2023 data is quoting responses from 23 to 40-year-olds. You can now download the full 2023 Australian Millennial Report for free at millennialfuture.co. And Strategies specialises in conducting qualitative and quantitative research projects for creative businesses within otherwise prohibitive timelines and budgets. So for more information, you can contact info@thestrategies.com.au. We're going to begin the first three charts are all going to be referencing major trend reversals that we've observed between 22 and 23. And the first of those is about growing conservatism. So it's often said that millennials globally differ from previous generations in that they don't appear to be growing more conservative as they get older. So the question on this chart is, in your opinion, which of the following attitudes towards sex is most true of Australia? And the responses from left to right are: our attitudes are becoming more conservative and that's bad, our attitudes are becoming more conservative and that's good, our attitudes are becoming more progressive or liberal and that's bad, our attitudes are becoming more progressive or liberal and that's good. In the red circles, you can see trends in the responses that indicate growing conservatism. Approval of more conservative attitudes increased steadily from between 2018 and 22, while approval of more progressive attitudes fell steadily over the same period. So those trends suggest millennials are indeed becoming more conservative, in Australia at least, but reversals between 22 and 23 over the last 12 months suggest that for Australian millennials at least, the path to greater conservatism may be in fact less direct than for previous generations. The second trend reversal we see here is around health, or specifically the concept of wellness. So millennials have always been closely linked to the concept of wellness, but ask them what they currently do to stay healthy, and as they get older, their preference for practices that we would typically associate with wellness, and those most notably being diets that avoid gluten, diets that avoid meat or animal products entirely, or diets that avoid processed food or clean eating, those are all falling. So while yoga and meditation do continue to be increasing popularity, it's what could be viewed as more traditional health practices that are up year on year. So that's calorie and fat restriction, aerobic exercise, and lifting weights. So the suggestion here is that wellness may not necessarily be so much of a millennial thing as it is a young person's thing, and that millennials, as they approach middle age, are actually aging out of wellness as an approach to health, as their overall approach to health moves from one of optimization to something that's more to do with maintenance of good health. And then thirdly, the question here is, when it comes to the environment, which of the following is most true of you? And the circled responses show a trend between 2018 and 22 of an increase in Australian millennials who feel that the science of environmental issues such as climate change has been exaggerated and is less of an issue than we are led to believe in the media. So climate change skepticism peaked at over 18% in 2022, but over the last 12 months it's fallen for the first time that we've recorded. Overall, millennials are on average environmentally conscientious, as you can see from the responses on the right-hand side of this chart, but the important thing to remember is that the field work for this research is done in January each year. So the two key events that you're seeing people responding to here are, firstly, the Black Summer bushfires in 2020, and then widespread flooding in 2022, both of which were going on exactly during the time of the field work for each of those dips. So it's yet to be seen if the shift that you're seeing there in a reduction in climate change skepticism will persist into 2024, but it is notable that the climate change skepticism increased through the 2020 bushfires, but appears to be decreasing in response to the 2022 floods. So without getting too political, I think it's fair to say that the federal government at the time of the fires at that time downplayed the influence of global warming, while the government at the time of the floods was more amenable to recognising its influence. And so while most individuals would say their positions on such issues are concrete, it's worth considering that the power of discourse in current affairs can still influence those opinions. Following on from that, the question here is, these days brands and corporations are increasingly involved in social and charitable causes. Which of the following do you consider the best way for businesses to contribute to these causes? So for brands, there is a consistent and growing preference among Australian millennials that brands would make improvements to their own businesses and manufacturing processes where possible. And that preference is over brands making cash donations to existing charities or using their marketing to broaden awareness of specific issues and causes. So if you're looking for a way for your brand to contribute to those causes or have a position in that conversation, it's increasingly clear that it's about the improvements you can make to your own processes and practices that are going to be the things that are demonstrating authenticity within those conversations. So you can only talk about millennial Australians for so long before the cost of housing comes up. In 2018, when we spoke to 18 to 35-year-olds, the sentiment was that for previous generations, there had been a clear path through the Australian economy, and that was completing high school, getting some qualifications, getting a job, getting married, and then buying a house. And all of that, if you did all of those things, you would end up with a self-funded retirement. And the feeling was that that path wasn't as clear for their generation anymore. So the feeling was that you could do all of those things and still not achieve home ownership or self-funded retirement. And at the time, that actually looked to be true. So there wasn't a correlation in our 2018 data between age and home ownership. So a 30-year-old we saw was no more likely to have a mortgage than a 25-year-old, for instance. Today, we do see that correlation, and you can see in this question, which is what is your current housing situation, that as our sample ages, the rate of home ownership does increase and renting decreases. Circled here is the rapid rise in millennial Australians who have a mortgage and live alone, which has risen steadily and is now over 14%. So the greatest effects of the exorbitant cost of Australian housing aren't seen here, but here. The question is, in your opinion, what is the ideal household? And circled is if fewer than 10% of Australians in their peak family building years who prefer or aspire to a family large enough to replace the population net of immigration. So we all know about the issues Japan has with its ageing population due to their birth rate of 1.34 per women. But ours is only 1.58 children per woman. The number will continue to fall because if you are to cut this data by parental status, almost all of the 8% who say that they want 3 kids are people who don't have any kids yet. And our results show that people reevaluate those aspirations of family size when they do first become parents. So probably the broadest global trend over the last 12 months has been inflation and increases in the cost of living and borrowing. This shows average scores out of 10 given to the question, how attainable do your financial goals feel? So 10 is high, 0 is the lowest, and red numbers indicate average scores by state and territory that have fallen over the last 12 months. So these responses were collected in January of 23. There have been about 5, I believe, interest rate rises in Australia since then, and I expect these scores would have fallen further in that time. So how much do those interest rate rises affect consumer sentiment? Well, the question here is, what is your greatest financial challenge? And circled there is the year-on-year increase in respondents saying their greatest financial challenge is paying off their mortgage. So for the final two charts, let's look at something more positive. Each year we ask respondents to rank out of 10 their perceived prospects for success over the next 5 years. It's a proxy for their optimism, and it helps us identify the attributes of Australian millennial life that are most closely correlated with above or below average personal optimism. And the single strongest predictor we can find of above average personal optimism in a young Australian is that they consider their work or the work that they do to be very important or worthwhile. So there's obviously a number of positive things that come with doing a job that you consider to be very important. But in general, I think this says that even at a relatively young age, Australian millennials just want to feel like their time on this earth is being spent meaningfully. And then finally, we asked respondents to rate the perceived attainability of their financial goals. So it helps us know who's feeling prosperous, who's struggling, and what attributes correlate with each of those states. So we can see here that there is still a lot of value in tertiary education. The question here is, what's the highest level of education you've achieved? And you can see that there's a strong correlation with undergraduate university and postgraduate university among those millennials that rate the attainability of their financial goals as high, which we group or label as thriving. And so while they may have felt back in 2018 that getting a degree was no longer necessarily a guarantor of prosperity, university, particularly postgraduate qualifications, are the strongest predictor we have of above average feelings of prosperity. And if somebody wants to get ahead in millennial Australia, I think there's probably still an argument that there's a great deal of benefit to going and getting additional tertiary university qualifications. So that was Australian Millennials in 9 charts. It was a very small excerpt from the 2023 Australian Millennial Report, which is currently available to download for free from millennialfuture.co. For any further questions, for a presentation of the full report or this top line that we've just gone through, or to discuss a qualitative or quantitative research project, contact Tom at info@thestrategies.com.au.